Hello YouTube. This video is about this cross member right here, and let me talk to you a little bit about it. Right now this is the only permanent cross member in the front of the car all the way back to the transmission mount, and there used to be a subframe underneath here with suspension components on it that tied the front end together. This is nothing more than really a core support, radiator core support. And this is a temporary brace that we put in there so we could jack it up. The idea is that we're going to replace this cross member. It serves two functions right now. Right now it is a radiator core support, which is what it was really meant for. And it's also the perch for the front springs. So the idea is to take this cross member out and replace it with this 2x4 box tubing. We're going to run it all the way out to the edge here. So it's going to be the spring support, and it's also going to be the core support. The difference in height between the spring perch and the core support is 1 3/8 of an inch. So we have to do something to reduce the 2-inch gap that we're going to have if we just put this 2x4 member in. And we're thinking what we're going to do is we're going to lop out the end here and plate it at the right height for the spring perch. So the way we're going to get started is we're going to start on the cross member. We'll start building the cross member before we disassemble anything. We'll get started by taking measurements of the bolts for the front perch. We'll take horizontal and diagonal measurements so we can locate the hole exactly. Here we go. This cross member is going to measure 32.5 inches. We have that marked off. We'll cut that on the bandsaw, and then we're going to have to put notches in the end for the spring perches. So here we go with the first cut of the cross member. This will give you an idea of what we're shooting for. We're going to insert this tube right there on the front of the axle, and it'll also become our spring perches. We've taken accurate measurements. These are the bolt holes and cross measurements. This is the cross member. The cross member is going to be 32.5 inches across. We want a difference in height of 1 3/8 inches from the top of the cross member to the bottom of the notch. And we want the notch to be 3.5 inches in. That'll give us enough room to put the spring perch in. So that's what we're doing here. We're laying it out on the cross member. And I have already marked off the 3.5 inches here. I don't know if you can see it. But what we have to do is mark off the 1 3/8 inches from the top. So here is 1 3/8 right there. And we'll come out here and we'll measure another 1 3/8. And I put a little gap in between here so if I have an error between the two, it's not so bad. Then we take a ruler and we put it up against those marks. And we scribe a line. And this is the section that we'll remove. We have the notches cut out, and they came out pretty nice. They're nice and square. And now what we have to do is plate them. And what I think we're going to do is run a plate down here first, and then we're going to cover this area second, and then we'll cover this area third. So that's 3 pieces. I've measured those pieces up, and here they are. We need 2 of each one for each side, and we're going to lay it out on a piece of metal. The internal measurements for each one of these patches is 3 3/4 of an inch. And if I add up the lengths I come up with 11.5 inches, and I'll give myself some room for kerf. So I'm going to cut out a piece that's 3 3/4 of an inch wide by 13 inches long. So let's lay that out. We want to go in 3 3/4, and to get a good measurement, what I'll do is I'll go to 4 3/4 here, 1 inch here, and I get a nice spot to mark it. And then we'll do the same thing down here. We'll go in 4 3/4, go to 1 inch, and mark it. And now we're going to scribe it. Now, I could do this with a flare, and some people like flares, but I like the scribe mark because it's a much finer line, and it gives me more of a chance to cut a straight line, I think, because a flare has width to it, and the scribe mark doesn't have as much width. The only problem with scribing like this is you can end up with a double line. So that's a pretty good line there. So let's measure off 13 inches. Right there, that should give us plenty. And let's go cut that on the bandsaw. Here are the 3 pieces that we needed for the plating of the notch. And to give you a preview of what that looks like, I've used some magnets to hold the pieces together. And we have one piece right there. Then we have another piece right here. And unfortunately, the third piece is a little bit too wide to fit, but it's easier to take metal off than it is to put on. What we're looking at here is the top of the cross member that we're going to install in this frame. And we have located the spots where the bolt holes need to go for the shackle mounts. And we have located the top and the bottom of the oval hole. We'll drill 3/8 inch holes in these 4 locations, and then cut out the metal in the middle to get our oval shape. The question was, how far down from the edge is this hole versus this hole? So what we did is we took a laser, and you can just see it. We took a laser and we went through the center of the hole for the shackle, across the frame to the center of the hole of the shackle on that side, and we got a measurement from the laser to the top of the hole for the core support. We measured down from the center of the rear holes for the shackles to get the location for the drill bit for the top oval hole, and that's how I laid out these holes. Even though the holes drawn on the metal look haphazard, if you look very carefully, you can see that there's a score mark here, and in the middle of the score is a punch mark. And that's exactly where we're going to drill that hole. And I've done that for all the holes. I've done that for these center holes here, and I've done that for the other end. What we're working on here are the oval holes that are in the cross member. And what we're going to do is drill a 3/8 inch hole right there and another one right there to get the upper and lower arcs, and then we'll cut out the metal between the two. But we're going to start out with an 1/8 inch pilot drill and work our way up. Now we'll go to a 1/4 inch. And now we'll go to 3/8 of an inch. And there we have the tops and bottoms of the slots that we're going to put in the cross member. We have one oval hole roughed out, and we're going to do the same thing here. What we're going to do is take the jigsaw and cut on the lines and come back with a file and straighten it out. Okay, we have an oval hole and the bolt fits in it. Next thing to do is to clean up the edges a little bit. So we'll take a carbide bit and a drill and just go around the edges. And take a file and straighten the edges up. This is the original cross member with slots in it. This is our cross member that we duplicated the slots in. This is the padding that goes between the cross member and the radiator core support. There's about a 1/2 inch there. And this is the core support with captured bolts in the bottom. Now I could take it apart and put longer bolts in, but these bolts fit fine. And these bolts fit in the original cross member and could be bolted because it was a single piece of metal. Now what we're going to do is have a single piece of metal, is drill access holes in the back so that we can put a ratchet in there and tighten the bolt. Rather than just having a hole here, we're going to put a sleeve in, and that way we won't have a hole in the subframe. To drill a hole this size, I don't have much choice but to use a hole saw. Not my favorite tool. And what we're going to do is drill an 1/8 inch pilot hole, and then we're going to use the hole saw to cut the hole so we can slide the sleeve in. So here we go. We have proof that the sleeve fits in the hole nicely. It's a nice snug fit. We'll weld that in and we'll be able to access those slots. Let's cut the next hole. Two big holes in the submember. Cutting round tube on a bandsaw is dangerous because the tube wants to roll with the blade. So if you put vice grips on either side, it helps hold it flat. So here we go to cut the sleeve to the right length. So let's see how it fits. Perfect. With the front spring perch unbolted from the adapter that was built 9 years ago, we can remove the adapter in advance of the new cross member that we're going to put in. So this adapter was quite ingenious. It was held on by one bolt and was meant to be welded in place. Here we are tacking in the end plates on the subframe. What we have here is our cross member tacked together. We haven't put in the end plate yet. It fits this way, but it doesn't fit this way. I'm going to have to taper it down a little bit, but we can get that done. What we're working on now is the placement of the spring shackles. And the spring shackles on the vehicle are exactly 29 3/4 of an inch apart. That's the center of the bolt holes. Are 29 3/4 of an inch apart. And what I've elected to do is find the center of the beam here, and I've scored that, and then I'm marking off exactly half of that, which is 14 7/8, and that's the center line for the bolts that will hold the shackle to the beam. Let's do that. We need a measurement of 14 7/8. Now I don't like to use the end of the ruler, so what we'll do is we'll go to 10 inches, which means we want 24 7/8. And we'll carefully estimate where that is. Now there's not much room to put a square on here, and I can't hold that very well, so what I'm going to do is clamp it in place. Let's verify our measurement. And this should be 24 7/8 of an inch, and that's what it is. And now we have a center line for our shackle. We have to find the distances this way, but as you can see, if I put this on the subframe, on the center lines, we have room for our bolt here, and we have a little overlap on the end. Now the important measurement is between this line and this line. It should be 29 3/4. So what I'll do is I'll go 30 3/4 and come back to the 1 inch mark, and it's perfect. We have located the vertical center line of the bolt holes for the spring shackle. And now what we need to do is locate the horizontal lines for the spring shackle. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure in on each side, and that's a 1/4 inch. And that's a 1/4 inch. Center it up. Measure it again. Take our centering punch, which is nothing more than a round steel rod with a little point in the center that's the size of the hole, and it drops right into the hole, and it marks the location of where that center point should be. And we'll relocate this thing because it moved. And mark this one. Now those are just marks. What we need to do is take a punch and punch out the location so we can get the drill bit started. Daggone it, I can't hit anything. And that looks good. Now remember, we're drilling holes for a sleeve that we'll put a bolt through so that we don't crush the member, and that bolt will go through the spring shackle. Now it's time to drill some holes, so let's go over to the drill press. This is the cross member, and we're about ready to start drilling holes for the sleeves that we're going to put in the cross member to accept our bolts, so that we don't crush the member when we tighten the bolt when we fasten the spring mount to the cross member. The first step is to drill 1/8 inch pilot holes, and we're ready to start doing that. And there we go. Now we'll go up to a 1/4. Now we'll drill with a 1/4 inch. Not with that bit we won't. That's more like it. Now we'll go to 3/8. We'll go to a 1/2 inch now. And finally 5/8, which is the size of the sleeve. We'll use a step drill to put a nice little bevel on the hole. See the nice little bevel here now? And repeat the whole procedure on this end. We have the holes drilled for the sleeves, and this is, we've dressed the hole so the sleeve fits nicely. Now what we're going to need to do is mark the length of the sleeve. Now I don't like to cut small pieces on the bandsaw, particularly round tube, so what we're going to do is insert this long one in, and we'll just put a Sharpie up against it and turn it. And now I have a nice cut line, and we'll do 2 at a time, so we'll do the other end. Here we go. I have a pair of vice grips gripping the tubing so it won't turn on me in the bandsaw, and a pusher because I'm going to be close to the blade, and we're going to cut just this side of the line so that the sleeve will be proud of the subframe when we're done cutting. Let's see how they fit. That one's good. That one's good. Now all we have to do is weld them up, grind them off, and you'll never know that that wasn't part of the subframe. We're looking at 2 different things here. First of all, this is a test fit of the front submember. But more importantly, if you look right here and right here, you'll see that the laser level is telling us that the frame is sitting exactly level right now. And if I take the laser level and put it down so it's across this member here, it'll shine on the frame and we'll know where to cut it. I'll show you what I'm talking about. If you look closely, you can see that the laser is just skimming the top of the frame member that supports the radiator core support. And that's going to be the surface of our new submember. So what we want to know is where to cut this frame so that this submember will set up into the frame here and be level with this cross member. And you can see there's a real nice line right there. So all I have to do is cut on that line, and this cross member will be up flush with this and will be at the right height. This is a good look at the new cross member that we're going to put in, and the bolts that bolt the spring shackle to the submember are in exactly the right position. And the bolts for the radiator core support are in the slot, and these bolts are evenly spaced from side to side. So we're going to move forward. What we're looking at here is the end of the subframe. We can see the spring shackle. We can see the bolts that hold the spring shackle to the subframe. And if we look inside the pipe here, we can see the sleeves that are holding the bolt from crushing the channel. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the opportunity of this end cap being missing, and I'm going to tack the sleeves in place so that we can finish welding on the table. What we're going to do now is clean up the ends of the frames so that we can mark it up for cutting for the subframe. We've leveled the frame out once again, and I have the laser just kissing the radiator core support cross member. And you can see that in the laser here where it's actually cut in half, where the laser is coming through the cross member. So what I'm going to do is mark the location in a bunch of different places so that I can find it in the daytime. What I've done is clamped a ruler to the frame at the line of the laser, and we'll draw a black Sharpie line along the top of that. And then we'll take a scribe and we'll scribe the line. So we can find it in the black. We can't go any further forward because there's a rivet right here and this. So we're going to have to cut this out before we continue this line forward. But that's in our future. I'm going to take this off. And we now have a nice scribed line right at the laser. What we're doing here is stiffening up the frame in preparation of cutting this cross member out. We already have a temporary cross member here welded in, and what we're going to do is take this bar and tack this in so it'll stop the frame from trying to roll. Here we go on the first cut to remove the cross member that supports the core support. After some cutting on the subframe, we removed a bunch of pieces, and now we have the new subframe clamped in place and the bolt holes line up. Next thing to do is to finish welding the subframe and then weld the subframe into the frame. Here we are doing the finished welding on the subframe. More welding. So here are the plates finished welded in place. Here we are tacking in the subframe to the frame. We put the engine back between the rails of the frame to put some weight in the frame. We have the sub member tacked in place. The measurements on the bolts were really good. I won't keep you around for the final welding. The cross member will look the same. So if you enjoyed this video, there'll be more.